as this workshop will be available on our website. So welcome. We are obviously Sanitation Water for All. We are organizing today a learning and exchange workshop on finance and advocacy. Which comes as a preparation of the finance ministers meeting that we will be organizing in Asia. And my name is Eloise, and I am the civil society advisor. I will show you my face because it makes it more personal. Hi, everyone. And I will ask you to mute yourselves as you're coming in, and put your name and your organization in the chat, and obviously express your interest to talk in the chat. We will come back to you in the discussion parts. Please also, for presenters, I will be passing through the slides. So just tell me next and I will pass through the slides. So today we will be having a very interesting dialogue where we will be having a presentation by Caterina Fonseca, who is the SWA advisor for finance, in which she will present the handbook that SWA developed for finance ministers, and in which she will also look at the role of civil society in using the handbook, but also in terms of finance and WASH advocacy. We will then have a discussion with CSO experts who will share experiences from the region and also outside of the region on how they are engaging on finance and WASH advocacy. And this will be facilitated by Dr. Sitaram, who is the CSO Steering Committee representative for Asia in SWA. This event is co-organized with FANSA, and a big thank you, obviously, to the team and all involved in organizing. I will just quickly remind you, and in order to start, that all of this is part of the preparation, as I said, of the Asia Finance Ministers meeting. And this meeting is an open meeting, and I would really, really call on you to participate. This is a great occasion to hear from finance ministers in your region. It's happening on the 2nd of December. You will need to register for it, and Anjani will share with you again in the chat the link for you to register. We will have ministers presenting case studies of how they are engaging and how they are yielding further finance for the sector, looking at efficiency, but also additional finance. And there will be a space as well where constituencies such as the civil society can ask questions to finance ministers. So please attend. I think this is an amazing opportunity. There will be a WASH Finance Week before, which is an occasion for you to do a buzz on finance, sharing your messages and your recommendations, but also calling on your finance ministers to participate to the event. Just as a reminder, so civil society, obviously you are key in organizing these events. You're key in pushing ministers and other leaders in investing for WASH. And as the preparation for finance ministers meeting, we call on you as much as possible to work with your civil society focal points and your government focal points. In SWA, we have focal points at country level to prepare for the meetings. And this can mean that you can reach out to the government focal points, work with them on country briefs, on briefing to ministers, on sharing handbooks. So we've developed this handbook for finance ministers that Katerina will present later, but we've had a lot of experiences in Africa of civil society and government going to finance ministers and handing over the handbook that provides interesting and very useful case studies and solutions to finance further the sector. And that has been a really interesting way of galvanizing the interest of the finance ministers. We also ask on you, according to your context, to use this opportunity to share your own messages on finance and WASH, given the COVID crisis. This through the media, social media, radios. So this is really an occasion for you to leverage what you're already doing on WASH advocacy for finance and use this opportunity to really reach out to your sector ministers and finance ministers. We've shared with you many documents. We've particularly created a kit for civil society where there is some standard letters, for example, to reach out to finance ministers. There is the CSO global messages. We will share with you again this kit, and Gianni will put it in the discussion. But really use this opportunity to really do this leverage, as we will be reaching out to your finance ministers, inviting them, so they will be having an ear to the ground, especially if citizens are calling for them to take this seriously and participate. So like I said, there is some civil society global messages that you can adapt to your local and country contexts. Anjani will share with you the link in the chat. Use them, abuse them, adapt them. We've also developed some social media elements that you can develop. There's a nice one I like, and I'll show it to you now. This is called GIFs. And these GIFs come from some of the global messages from civil society. They are yours. You can use them. You can share them with media through Twitter. They're very short but communicative ways for civil society to call on ministers and others to include citizens in budget planning or to target subsidies for those that are left behind. They're part of the Trello board that Anjani will share with you. But this is just a simple example of how you can use our materials and adapt them to your context. So I will end there, and I will now leave the floor to Caterina Fonseca, who will do a presentation, like I said, on the Handbook for Finance Ministers, but also the role of civil society on watch advocacy and finance. Caterina.
Thank you, Eloise. Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I see Maldives also on the line. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I see a lot of friends that I worked with for many years already on the line. Also very nice to have you here. So I was asked to make a small, next please, to make a small presentation on the handbook, but really from the angle of what I think are the four pathways for CSO engagement in this whole process of influencing finance ministers. And I'll provide also a few ideas and starting points on how to do this, and then we will hear a lot more examples later in the session. So next, please. As you by now, everyone knows, I think by now, SWA, next slide. Sorry. SWA launched the Handbook for Finance Ministers last month, and we are already in slide 4. Shall I do it myself? Or?
Eloise?
Yes, yes, I
Okay.
think we've...
There's some problem in the slides. Can you maybe move on?
Yeah, sure. I'm doing that. Can you hear Caterina? I'm having trouble hearing.
Sure, I'm back.
Okay,
I'm
sorry,
here.
sorry,
I was
Caterina.
completely kicked out of the platform.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no, we were going through.
Oh.
Sorry, can you take it over, Caterina, from what you were saying?
Yes. Can you go one slide higher, please?
Yes.
Before.
There's a bit of a problem with this slide. Yeah, sure.
I can also just, go with that.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm going to try to, as much as possible, solve the slide problem, but
Sure, don't
I'm
worry.
on it. Sorry about that.
Okay, so I can just mention, so I'm on that one, yes. So the handbook was co-written with Bill Kingdom, Victoria Dalman, and Leslie Torres, and but it has been really almost detective work to find the best cases of successful case studies of where the different stakeholders managed to increase finance for the sector and how they've done this. And CSOs were also part of that process. So we want to inspire you, both ministers of finance, line ministers, and other stakeholders on how to go about it. Next, please. And why was the main target to the finance ministers? Well, because in many countries, they are simply gatekeepers to the coffers of the state, but actually in most of them, with their treasury teams, with very long, yearly long budget processes, they do pull all the budget together from the different sectors, and they do make important decisions following either national guidelines or national priorities. So what is the content of the handbook? And this was really the 4 areas of where finance ministers could support policies to mobilize more finance. And I think the first one, so maximize value from existing public funding, is also one of the areas where I think CSOs and NGOs can influence the most, because this really has to do with incentivizing sector performance, with improving subsidy targeting, and overall promoting better sector planning and management. So it's a lot of, this is really an area that I will touch a lot upon. The second area, the second intervention area that is in the handbook is to mobilize more funding. From a political perspective, this is really the least popular measures are here around this area, but they rank very high in terms of mobilizing more finance. They are about setting the adequate cost recovery policies, about reforming tariffs, about introducing taxes, which are really important for sanitation and to reach the poor populations, and establishing all sorts of cross subsidies. The third area in the handbook, it's about increasing repayable domestic finance. This is about creating a lot of mechanisms to reduce the perceived risks in the sector, but also pooling finance from different levels. The last one, the 4th area of intervention, which is very explicit in the handbook, is encouraging access to innovation and least explored approaches. The examples here are about climate funds and also social impact bonds. Now, what is important in this diagram is that on the left, you can see the first 2 areas of intervention really mobilize more resources than the last 2 areas. And of course, I'm generalizing, this is not always true, but what I see is a lot of the finance discussions move extremely fast to, for instance, climate funds, to the green area, when a lot more funds can be mobilized by for instance, reforming the subsidies or the tariffs, which are in the first 2 blocks. So I think this is important to make these distinctions. Please, next, please. And for each of these intervention areas, we have about 20 short cases. And we've really been tracking them down, trying to understand who mobilized them, how much money it has been mobilized. But they all have one thing in common, which is they require the cooperation with colleagues from Treasury. So these are, you can find all of these cases from all of these countries. Asia is, well, we try to get representation from across the globe, and you can dig in. So until here, you can find it in the handbook, and from now on is specifically for this session. Next, please. So there are basically, I mean, if I can summarize, there are 4 pathways for CSO engagement in finance, and they're very complementary, either directly with Ministry of Finance or to the Ministry of Water and other line ministries, through more local level, through the district political and technical financial decisions, and directly with citizens and other CSOs. And I'm going to give you examples in each of this. Next, please. So first, for the first pathway, this really includes a coalition of NGOs and CSOs, but also budget tracking organizations beyond the water sector. And in the handbook, already in slide 10, in the handbook shows the example from Mozambique. And in the example from Mozambique, so we're talking about the first pathway directly with ministers of finance. Slide next. Yes, this one. So in Mozambique, they created the CSOs and the NGOs created the budget forum. And they have worked, there was a big crisis, a big financial crisis in Mozambique in 2016, and there were cuts across all the budgets. And what this group has done was really to work directly with Parliament to limit the cuts in the water sector to 1%, which, I mean, 1% of your budget of the water sector of the national budget is very low, but they managed to make the cuts not go under 1%. And after they've done that, and this was directly with Ministry of Finance, they actually have supported the Planning and Budget Commission to scrutinize the national budgets, and they requested the government to set out the Mozambique national accounts in a clear, more accurate, simple format, which was accessible to citizens. And so in 2017, the government agreed and they made available what was called the State of General Accounts and published alongside that a very simplified version called the Citizens Account. So this is one of the best examples we found directly engagement, but it was really when the institutions of the sector were failing, when there was a very large crisis in the country. Next, please. So this was the first pathway of engagement. Another pathway of engagement is the one that we are most used to in the water sector, which is directly with the Ministry of Water and other line ministries to understand budgets and the expenditure, but also to set accountability mechanisms, which are many times actually part of the existing regulations, but not put into practice. Another example here is to participate actively in sector reviews by bringing in a stronger finance component to the sector review discussions, because I've seen some of them are completely missing the financial sides. So I want to give you here two examples, which are in the handbook. Next, please. The first example, I'm going to give you the example of Mali and then Colombia. Next, please. So Mali has developed the national accounts for water sanitation using the TRACFIN methodology. This was back in 2015 when they started, with the support of WHO, UNICEF, and WaterAid. And CSOs have also been quite involved in this whole process. When the first report was published in 2017, it showed that the water sector was getting just a little bit over 1% of the national budgets. And through the discussions of the TRACFIN results and presenting the findings to the Cabinet Council, which was shared by the Prime Minister, we can see that then this has then increased in 2018 to more than 2.6% of the budget. And now I know that the latest data shows that they managed to get the water sector to go to 3.5% of the national budget. And this has a lot of, it's really the government working in coalition with CSO platforms. And many of you might be thinking, okay, this is a really long process. And the example of Mali, it did take 2 to 3 years. But this is, I've seen this process going much faster in some more recent countries, and also mostly at district level. You can have much faster changes. And in the last meeting, there were a couple of questions of where exactly is the best timing to influence this process. And I would say that you can have the biggest influence before the budget goes to Parliament. So it's during the whole year of budget process discussions before Parliament approval. So yes, you can work with parliamentarists, but that is already a little bit too late in the process. You need to start this process way before the budget gets to Parliament. So concluding on this example, with good data, good evidence, by attending the right meetings, you actually can see some of these changes within one budget cycle. Next. This example is not, we actually don't know if CSOs were involved, but SWA asked me to talk a little bit more about subsidies. So I wanted to give another example, which was in the handbook. And this was So Colombia has implemented a law for public utilities to mandatorily expand coverage in urban areas. What happened as a result was that coverage increased from 77% in 1993 up to 92% in 2018. Well, guess what? Guess who were the 8% missing? The 8% were rural areas, informal neighborhoods in the cities that continue to be underserved because they were mainly perceived as unattractive from an investment perspective from the utilities. So the Ministry of Housing and Cities decided to develop additional incentives for service providers in the lower income areas. And what it did was direct subsidies to informal service providers, conditional of adoption of technology solutions that were suited for both rural areas and low-income neighborhoods, but also that they needed over time to achieve the service, well, the legal service standards that were required of them. This program, I mean, it has a budget of $2.5 billion for the next 12 years, and it has very ambitious coverage targets. Again, very high level political commitments to enable these changes. But there was a push. I mean, there was data, there was evidence that was put on the table showing who was not being served and that the existing incentives were not enough to get them served. Next, please. So we get now into the third pathway, which are going to have a couple of examples in this session about the CSO engagement with the district political and technical finance-related decisions. Next, please. And here, some of the most powerful examples that I know include open budgets. This is an example from DORP in Bangladesh, who's here with us. So I'm not going to go. I like to spend a lot of time in this example, but Zobaya will present it. And I can just say that for the past 4 years, they have trained both local government and local marginalized groups on how to make budget transparent and increase them for those that are being left behind. And Zobaya is in this call. He will talk more about the work of his organization. You can also, all of my slides have links to the briefing notes and the documents where the information comes from, because you can't find this in the handbook. But on this example, I just want to show you an example, which is very impressive, of a budget sheet, and that this was developed with the local government, and that it specifies, next please. You can see the budget sheets that have really divided allocations between women, girls, elderly, persons with disabilities, and excluded groups, also construction and maintenance. Amazing, impressive, sophisticated budget processing tools. So again, the links below where you can find all of this. And I have to speed up. Next, so I go to the last pathway, to something that I don't think we do enough in the water sector, which is really engaging directly with citizens and other CSOs. And it's being more accountable to citizens that we are supposed to represent, and not only being accountable upwards towards governments. So how can you do this? Well, some of the best examples that I have are from training budget champions and also involving the media and grassroots organizations, especially with COVID. I think involving the media can be very impactful. Next, please. I give you the example from the watershed team, which I have the honor to work with. So this is from Kenya, and CESPAD in Kajiado County really engaged with one of the most popular radio stations at prime time for a whole week to discuss budget participation. Here, this is the main DJ of the station, also budget champion, Victor Juma from Radio Bus, and Abigail, who also became one of the budget champions for her community. You have very small, short 3-minute clips. You can hear data. I don't want to be speaking for themselves. You can hear themselves saying what have they done, how they have done it. And it also links to the budget manual done by CESPAD. So this was done in September, and this was presented in the watershed team meeting, and that meant that another CSO in Uganda for Portal Hewasa is using exactly the same methodology to also influence the budget process, even when we have COVID, even when we cannot be directly in contact with the communities. And next, so I'm coming to an end. So where to start? I think for each of these, the 4 approaches of the handbook, CSOs and NGOs can really ask questions, can collect evidence, you can collaborate with others, you can bring some of these issues really to sector platforms. I have listed here some of the key questions for your colleagues of the Ministry of Finance or line ministries. I have seen also the list of points that was shared on the SWA website for CSOs, and they're excellent. But here they are just organized by the areas of the handbook. And I know many of you are working in many of these areas. So to close, I would like to say that a lot of the stories, you have many more stories, very inspiring. This is a beautiful 11-minute video from the Watershed team. So you can watch this video, and you can also go to the resources page where you have more in-depth manuals and briefing notes besides the video. And next slide, if you would like more information, please contact Mrs. Kapoor from SWA or me. Some of you know how to reach me.
Great.
That's it.
Thank you so much, Katerina, for this really interesting presentation. We're going to welcome questions. As there's many of you on the call, I think it might be easier that you express in the chat if you want to talk, and I will come to you. So just put in the chat hand raised, and I will come to you, as I would like to avoid everyone talking at the same time. So if you have a question for Katerina or even a comment, please put hand raised. Yes, who's speaking?
I have a question.
Who are you? Could you present yourself?
Shah Nasir from ISP FANSA, Pakistan.
Okay, go ahead,
Katrina.
Shah Nasir. But for the others, after Shah Nasir, please put hand raised in the chat discussion, and I will go one by one. But go ahead, Shah Nasir.
Hello, 1 second. I've been, sorry, Shah Nasir, but just a second. Hello, I've been getting a lot of messages that people are in the waiting room. Can you please let them in?
I will try to do so, but I haven't, at the moment, I don't see them coming in, but I will deal with that as we go along. Go ahead, Shah Nasir. Shah Nasir, do you want to ask a question?
Yes. I will just stop because of Seneha asking stuff. Okay, Katrina, I have 2 small questions. One is, because we are, my organization and I myself, we are involved in this budget processes because in Pakistan is a totally different scenario comparing to African and rest of the South Asian country. We have a provincial, this water and sanitation is a provincial subject, and provincial government, they are basically allocate money. So as far as allocation is concerned, we never face a problem. When we approach the government agree and they increase the money. But spending, actual allocation is a problem, because for water and sanitation, the government allocate money in block. Block mean money for water and sanitation and hygiene. So big chunk of money goes to infrastructure, big tube wells, other public health related infrastructure. So is any guideline available in this this notebook we can work how to ensure smart utilization? Because allocation is totally a different scenario for us, for CSOs. Actual utilization at the grassroots level can work when the money goes to the grassroots level and those community who are far away and in remotes. And the second, either we can approach the federal finance ministry before this finance minister meeting, or when they attend the meeting and come back, so then can we start lobbying or educating? That's 2 questions. Okay.
Great, thank you, Shah Nasir. Maybe Katrina, do you want to answer to that first question? And then for the others, please, if you have questions, put hand raised in the chat and we'll come back to you. But go ahead, Katrina.
Thank you, Shah Nasir, for these very interesting questions. On the first one, so you went through the first step. Influencing budget is not a problem, allocation is a problem. Now, I don't know the details specifically of Pakistan, but I can give you a couple of examples. So the first one, of course, is to have some sort of accountability mechanism platforms in place. If the issues are discussed in sector reviews on sector platforms, or if you see in the case of Bangladesh, if you actually have public budgets on the walls, it makes it more difficult not to spend the money. But there might be other causes. So you need to understand, to go deeper into the causes of what we call low absorption capacity. Sometimes the low absorption capacity has nothing to do with the water sector. If your public financial management system, and in this case, you have another layer, which is the provincial, if it takes 8 months from the money to go from national to local government, and then you have 5 months or 4 months to spend the money, and if you don't spend it until the end of the year, it has to go back to central government. This is not a problem of the water sector. This is a problem of public financial management. And again, you need to engage with Treasury. You need to engage with those setting up the public financial management to bring this to their attention. If it has nothing to do with public financial management, it actually has to do with the utilization. And you do need to go back into the root causes of the problems. A lot of the things that I've seen, for instance, is that there's only budget for infrastructure, and it's reasonable, and there's absolutely no budget for follow-up, for monitoring, to actually do quality assurance of the contractor. So then this was, I give you the example of Tanzania, then the rural water sector had a huge increase in budget only for infrastructure, where the institutions remain exactly the same. So there is no point in just having, if you just have one budget increase for infrastructure, but if the people that actually need to proactively follow the construction, where is it, the quality, they don't have money, not even for fuel for their vehicle, to rent a taxi to go and follow up the construction, then actually, again, you don't see that utilization on budget. I hope Zobair is also on the call. They managed to increase some of the utilization. This was in Bangladesh. Maybe later he can bring in his example. Now, on second question, on where do you influence the federal finance ministries? Each country has very different budget processes, and they take over a place of a year, and they have places where even by law you are required, or the line ministries are required to influence. What I have seen is that in our sector, there's very little understanding of this process and exactly where you can influence. I raised this question, for instance, with some colleagues from Uganda a couple of years ago. And one colleague from Uganda, what she did was she invited one colleague from Treasury to come and explain in detail the budget process and where were the areas where the line ministries could come in, where citizens could come in, and to have that whole process, because it's not one moment, it's several moments. But by the moment, what I have seen as well is a lot of effort in trying to influence parliamentarists, which is fine, but it has to come in addition to influencing the yearly budget process. If you're just coming at the end to influence parliaments, the budgets have already been discussed. The big cuts, the big lines, if it goes for construction, if it goes for water, for sanitation, those decisions have already passed through a very long process. So it's more, be careful, be aware of what that process is, and it's an ongoing, it requires an yearly interaction with different angles, both technical and political.
Thank you so much, Katerina. And just to say to everyone, so we're listening to you very attentively, because what you're saying now, we're going to pick it up for the finance ministers meeting, and that message of really looking at efficiency and maybe asking a question for finance ministers on efficiency is something that we're going to be looking very, we will be very attentive to in this discussion and at the finance ministers meeting. Thank you, Katerina. We're going to enter now the second part of our session, and I'm going now to leave the floor to our moderator, Dr. Sitaram, who will ask experts to give concrete examples of WASH and finance advocacy. So, Dr. Sitaram, the floor is yours, and you would just need to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Alois, and good afternoon to everybody who has spared the time and come over for this important workshop. I'm happy that all the participants have been responding well and saying that this is very useful. So thanks a lot, Katerina, for a very good walkthrough of the important document that has been produced by SWA. Reading it is one thing, but getting it explained and the discussion is another, quite another. So thank you very much. It clarified quite a lot. But then questions do persist. There are two parts to this workshop, as I can see. One is about answers. We need to look at what has worked in some parts of the country or in some parts of the globe, which we can learn from. So looking for answers, that is one part, which we will do now. And the other part is looking for the right questions. Unless we ask the right questions, probably we will not be able to get the right answers either. And we'll first look at some answers, some actual work that has led to some positive impacts. And to share some of these positive impacts, we have two experts, one from India and one from Bangladesh, who will be sharing their experience now. I'll first call upon Mrs. Vedika Bhandarkar, who heads the water.org in India and has been doing a lot of advocacy for WASH funding. And she will be sharing the grassroots level experience of how advocating for WASH funding created a good impact over a period of time. So I now invite Mrs. Vedika Bhandarkar to share the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Sitaram. And it's a pleasure to be here, to be talking with all of you. It's always a hard act to follow Katerina, but I will try my best. So I wanted to give a specific example, especially when we are talking about financing. And this is very recent, something which has happened actually only last month. So I want to talk about this domestic financial institution in India called NABARD. It's a DFI, a development financial institution. And NABARD recently announced and earmarked about $110 million equivalent refinancing facility in rupees, specifically for WASH financing. So if you could turn to the next slide, please. So as I mentioned, on 2nd of October, which was last month, which is the anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi's birth, this NABARD announced that they would put aside 800 crore rupees, which is $110 million for the current financial year. So India follows an April to March financial year. So for the current financial year ending March 2021, which is specifically for WASH-related financing. So any financial institution, whether it's a microfinance institution, whether it's a bank, if they want to lend for WASH-related activities, either to households or to small enterprises, they can do so, and then they can get this refinancing facility from NABARD, which is at a low cost, which really incentivizes the financial institution to participate in WASH lending. And I think this low cost point is particularly relevant in today's context, given what's happening due to COVID in terms of the economic impact, and how low cost financing is particularly relevant both for households as well as small enterprises for activities relating to WASH. So if you can turn to the next page, please. So I thought, maybe a timeline might be the best way to explain how this came about. So NABARD is a well-known institution. So obviously somebody who we know and speak with. NABARD has also been a lender as well as a refinancier to many of the financial institutions in India for their overall lending, right? Not specifically related to water and sanitation. Every year we water.org does a big gathering in the country, in India, where they get all the stakeholders together. And by the way, we do something similar in Bangladesh, we do something similar in Indonesia, in every country that we work in. So back in January, it was the India Forum, and this is when all of us could travel and meet in person before these virtual meetings started. And so we had invited NABARD to attend the meeting, and we had given them a lot of background information about lending for water and sanitation, about the experience of financial institutions when they lend for water and sanitation, and how this is good lending and how the repayment rates were very good, etc. Unfortunately, NABARD could not attend the meeting, but the seeds had already been planted. Then in May, along with Sadhan, which is an apex financial institution, apex institution for microfinance and NGOs in India, Water.org and Sadhan got our partners virtually together in May to talk about how COVID was impacting their operations, whether lending was happening, whether they had liquidity, etc. And we agreed as a follow-up, and based on what we heard from the financial institutions, that we would continue to follow up with NABARD and jointly nudge them. Fast forward to July, there was a workshop which was organized by, again, a virtual workshop organized by the India Sanitation Coalition. One of the topics was financing for WASH, and NABARD and Water.org were in the same webinar and again talked about the issues facing the financial institutions. And after that, things started moving really fast. Both NABARD was engaged with Water.org as well as NABARD was engaged with Sadhan. NABARD put together a note. We quickly provided inputs on that, and it moved really fast. And on October 2nd, to everybody's delight, NABARD announced this refinance policy. And I think what was exciting, or what is exciting, is how NABARD's really adopted this, how they are reaching out to financial institutions across the country, and how they are so engaged. They have prepared collateral, they've prepared radio jingles, videos to really encourage both communities as well as financial institutions to focus on this space. And if I can move to my last slide, which is the next one. So I wanted to take probably 30 seconds to talk about what are the factors which led to this success. I think there are three key things. One is strong partnerships, right? So from the beginning, there was clear alignment on what was required. There was alignment between Water.org and Sadhan. There was alignment between when we were communicating, when Water.org was communicating with NABARD. There was total confidence that while Sadhan was also independently communicating with NABARD, there was total alignment. So that's the first point. The second is ability to respond and be client focused, and ability to respond immediately. So, while we had been working towards this for more than a year, when the time came, when it came to crunch time, and when NABARD needed some quick turnaround, it is important that we were all able to turn around quickly while providing useful inputs. And then I think the third is related to the second one, which is seizing the opportunity. So several of these advocacy initiatives, as all of you know very well, take time. You have to plant seeds well in advance, and you really can't control when the plant will start growing. But when it does, I think it's important that all of us work in partnerships and seize the opportunity. So I hope this example was helpful, and very happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you, and back to you, Dr. Sitaram.
Thanks a lot, Vedika. That was quick, concise, but very precise and also very informative. Trust and strong partnership, prompt, immediate response, and seizing the opportunity. I think there are extremely good lessons to learn. And we have seen that there has been, despite all the COVID lockdowns and whatnot, we have all worked together and have been able to create some impact in the past few months as well. So that's very heartening to know. Definitely there are opportunities, particularly because Many of us work with NABARD and its institutions, NAPFINs and other institutions. Most of our organizations, now I can see Dr. Varsha as a participant, and then Mari has been working intensely with NABARD for many years. So the relationships with NABARD and its allied institutions already exist. And I'm sure we will be able to leverage that in a bigger way for financing into WASH sector as well. So we should be able to look at such opportunities and like you rightly said, act promptly. So we will now move on to an example from Bangladesh, where Mr. Zobair Hassan of DORP will share a grassroots experience of budget tracking. Perhaps this would also be relevant to what was shared in the presentation by Katerina, and partly to Shah Nazir's question about the monitoring at the grassroots level itself. So I'll now call Mr. Zobair Hassan to continue with the presentation.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Sitaram. May I audible to all of you?
Yes, Zobair, please proceed.
Yeah, thank you very much. No, I think this is a very good opportunity to share our ground experience, what already initiated by Katrina Fonseca, that how globally the budgeting and financing process has been undertaken, and what are the positive initiatives, as well as some kind of challenges over there. So in the similar context or similar situation, we have tested this whole budgeting process in our country in one of the initiatives that has been a little bit mentioned also in the watershed program. That's how people can be engaged in the process, because in the budget tracking, because without participation of the peoples, budgeting cannot be very useful for the people and for particularly for WASH. So in that case, we have seen in this period of this SDG arena that many are being left behind, and because of not available and sufficient allocation, and particularly marginalized are not part of the decision making process, because we have seen all the planning has top down and it's not discussed well with the community level, and they did not ask even the what is the need of the community, particularly marginalized. And in many cases, particularly in Bangladesh, we have seen the budget is fragmented. And I'm sure in the South Asia region, many of the countries, it's not only focused only WASH, but also other infrastructure has been also related to the budget. And that's why, and thus inequalities in our society increase. You have seen that in the top level, we don't have problem with the allocation, that also Nasir Bhai was mentioning from Pakistan, but but at the same time, utilization is also a problem. So that's why we need the budget tracking, and we have tried to focus it at the ground, and ultimately that poor can be the benefited and excluded. Next slide, please. Yeah, so budget tracking actually is a kind of process of systematic allocation and utilization to see by the engagement of the people. And in our practice and in our example, what we have seen, if we consider these four approaches, that really helped a lot to engage the policymakers as well as the duty bearers and also the right holders and also excluded. So first of all, in this case, budget, sometimes people are saying it's classic, cannot access, so it's need to be very open to all. We need a lot of campaign, social mobilization, and as you know, in the SWA finance ministers meeting, that's really getting this opportunity for campaign and mobilization. And the service providers monitoring what they are providing, who are they, how much they are providing, that's people need to do. As in the one of the budget tracking sheets, Katrina was showing that how each of the line items actually using, and also continuous lobby and advocacy at various levels, even at the national level to the ground level, and also definitely the numbers, that budget, how much allocation. Next slide, please. Yes, so in the budget tracking, we have to think directly that who is responsible. You have seen some of the pictures, the Department of Public Health Engineering, they are the service providers. So we should approach them, how much allocation for them, what is their role to play. And also Union Parishad, the lowest tier of the local government system, where the community people can express their need. So the connectivity needs to be improved over there. The decision makers should welcome the excluded communities. Women can express their need, particularly where they are not welcomed by discussion. And also evidence-based documents should be introduced. And that has happened into one of the ground in our country. And we have seen, next slide, please. Yeah, that we have seen the engaging the CSOs and the mobilization, result of mobilization, it has increased. You see that during the fiscal year 2018 to 19, around 5% has been increased. It was 18, 19, 13%. Now it's 19% in one of the lowest tier of the local government system. It's a kind of small example, but you see it is happening because of the systematic approach, and also timely approach. Next slide, please. Yeah. So ultimately, what has happened that you see that for the transparency and accountability has been increased, and in the wall of the document, Union Parishad in India, it's a panchayat, that is everything has been written in the line item, each of the line items. How many of the people are also illiterate at the ground? That's also true, but at least they can ask themselves something happening in the ground. And also it creates increase the accountability process of the local government system, as well as the total wash budgeting system, and mobilizing community, and also ensure the engagement of the relevant stakeholders, duty bearers, public representatives, service providers, everyone. It's a space of discussion, participation. And ultimately what we have seen that it has directly contributed to the SDG 6.A, which mentioned that people's participation should be very important in the any kind of discussion, particularly SDG achievement. So this is a very small example, but I think there is a good impact on it. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Zubair Bhai. That was quite informative. Yeah, small, but then small is also big, because multiple small things added up is what adds up to a big thing. So I think in your experience and example as well, there are many lessons that we can all learn and adopt to our circumstances, and create a similar or adding up sort of impact, which will ultimately add up to a much bigger size at the national and the regional level. Two lessons from the South Asian region, India, which spoke of the macro national level impact, and one from Bangladesh, where we had a grassroots level impact. Two important experiences which have lessons for all of us. But now we will move on to another part of the globe. The beauty of the platform like the Sanitation and Water for All, SWA, is that it brings on board to the same platform experiences and lessons from all over the world. So now we have some important lessons to be learned from South Africa and Sierra Leone. The lessons would definitely be relevant for all of us here, because the experiences would be valuable and similar. So I now call upon Mr. Dustin Kramer from Cape Town, from the International Budget Partnership, to share examples, two examples from South Africa and Sierra Leone, which would help us perhaps understand these issues better and create an impact similar to those places. Over to you, Mr. Kramer.
Thank you very much, and hi everyone. It's great to be here, and many thanks for the invitation, and the discussion has been really interesting so far. So I hope these examples are helpful and interesting for everyone. So So yes, I'm Dustin. I'm from the IBP. I'm with the advocacy team, and I'm going to be speaking to two examples relating to public resources and water and sanitation in terms of a few lessons around tracking openness and change that we've seen in these examples within the Africa region. So maybe just by way of background, at IBP, we work with civil society partners on a range of things, including country-level budget analysis and advocacy, research, and trying to really build a broader field of groups engaging with and using budgets in many different parts of the world. And some of you also may know that we work with partners in over 100 countries to conduct the Open Budget Survey, which is a global survey of budget transparency, participation, and oversight, which also gives us a lot of the evidence base for quite a bit of the work that we do. So I'm going to start with South Africa. South Africa, as some of you may know, is a highly unequal country. And across the country, many people live in informal settlements, neighborhoods made up mainly of informal housing. And in this context, access to water and sanitation is a major problem. Toilets are often far from people's homes, shared between many households. And in particular in South Africa, safety is a major issue that intersects with sanitation, because walking long distances at night to use a toilet is often an extremely dangerous thing to do. And this is a major problem of murder, sexual assaults. These kinds of things happen just by trying to use a toilet. So when the COVID-19 pandemic hit South Africa this year, it was clear that the issue of water and sanitation would really be central, because informal settlements experience high density. As I said, communal toilets are shared between many households. And how can residents protect themselves if they can't even wash their hands? And it was this context that led IBP South Africa. IBP is a global organization, but has an office in South Africa, as in a few other regions. So IBP South Africa and a coalition of partners started what was called the Asivikelane campaign, which means let's protect each other. And this is a collaborative project covering over 200 informal settlements across the country to collect feedback from residents on challenges with accessing water, sanitation, and refuse collection. And many of the organizations involved really built on the experience of doing social audits in South Africa, a form of community-based auditing of government services. And it's worth noting, just in terms of what was said earlier, that this is a diverse group with many different focus areas. So not just organizations focused on water, but bringing a range of different experiences to the table. And so this project started getting on the ground real-time data based on a standard set of questions through WhatsApp, text messages, and phone calls. And we can go to the next slide. So this was basically every 2 weeks turned into a dashboard. So taking this data directly from residents of informal settlements and turning it into a dashboard with which to engage with governments. And the one thing I want to emphasize here is that the key element has been amplifying the voices of residents in informal settlements, and in so doing, providing good quality information with which governments can act. And so in many places, this worked well, and many local governments responded positively. And one of the big lessons here has been that the campaign really showed how using resident-produced data to engage with government has real impacts in different ways. And one of them is improving services, improving actual access, but also improving the use of public funds. And this has been really crucial. So, in this context, it has helped to ensure that there is sufficient money allocated for services like sanitation, and then that this money is actually used effectively. So I'll share a link to the page in a moment, but if we go to the next slide. So I also wanted to mention just one more example, which I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but I'm also going to share more about this because we've actually just published an in-depth story on this one, and I think this might be of real interest to everyone in terms of the discussion. So in Sierra Leone, one of our partners, the Budget Advocacy Network, they work on government accountability, focusing on ensuring greater inclusiveness in government spending decisions. And with other CSOs, they conducted a public expenditure tracking survey. And they found that the main problem around water and sanitation in schools in this context was not lack of funds, but that funds for water and sanitation were not being protected and prioritized within funding for schools in particular. And so they've been doing some really good work on advocating for water and sanitation to be a standalone focus in the allocation of school subsidies. And this actually has become a really important strategic entry point for them. And what you'll see in the story if you read it, is that it's a really great example of how civil society has engaged with different parts of the government. And in this case, they also did a lot of their work with the Supreme Audit Institution. And through this really identified how the funds could be prioritized within existing subsidies. And also looked at how to engage with the different sectoral departments. So I'm going to, in a moment, I'll put some links in the chat for you to have a look at. But the one thing I just wanted to say sort of in conclusion is that there is huge potential to improve access to water and sanitation. And from what we've seen and with all the partners that we work with, openness is really key to this, and broader openness. And I'm really glad that the presentations have really been covering this issue a lot. And so for this reason, this year with the launch of the Open Budget Survey, we also launched a call to action on open budgets. And really we're trying to increase openness across the board. So I'm also going to share the link with you in a moment. And these are just very quick snapshots. So there's a lot more detail that you can explore and in the stories themselves. So many thanks for this wonderful opportunity. And I really hope that these sort of, these are helpful explorations for you as we sort of think about these big questions. So thank you very much. And I will pop these links in the chat now.
Yeah, thank you, Dustin. That was definitely impressive. Working in different and difficult situations, answering to the challenges of different communities. I'm sure this will give diverse inputs as we move ahead as one global community. Very interesting and important lessons. I do hope you'll share the story in detail, which we would be able to go through and perhaps get back to you for clarifications or more information. Now we have some time for questions or some sharing. Quickly, if there are any very important questions, you can probably unmute and ask your questions.
Sitaramji.
Anji.
Sitaramji. Namaste, sir.
Namaste.
One small question for me. This is regarding NABARD refinance scheme. Saru. Regarding a NABARD refinance scheme, how can we get funds from NABARD through local banks, local national banks, or directly from NGO? Is there any possibility to NGO to apply directly? Because it's a 5 months time only. Sanitation is the more important. For getting a low cost, low rate of interest is a very good idea. Madam told, kindly give some clarity on that, sir. That's all.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. We will find out more specifics of the rules, regulations, guidelines, and the scheme details of how that budget that's been allocated now would be utilized. And like I said, many of us have grassroots connects which can ensure that this money is properly allocated and the allocated money is properly utilized. Yeah, that's a good question. I think that's very important to know the nitty-gritties of how it's going to be actioned out. So we will definitely get more information and share it in the group, both within FANSA as well as all the SWA partners. We'll get the information from Vedika and the other stakeholders and get back to you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you.
Is there any other important question?
Okay.
Eloise
Yes,
or Anjani, did you see any other important response
That's up
in the chat box that needs to be highlighted?
We're looking at it. I think someone wants to speak, Sitaram.
That's up. Can I ask a question?
Yes,
can
go
you
ahead.
Introduce yourself, please.
Yeah. Okay, Shah Nasser is again here. My question, I like this.
Oh, yes,
Zubair,
sir. Please.
Yes, Zubair presentation and I like the idea, this budget tracking, but this budget tracking is sometimes not solve the purpose at the grassroots level. I'm more interested about this a sort of performance auditing to know the actual utilization. For example, if a money is allocated for one scheme in a remote area, sometime the public health engineering department or the local government department, these are the two departments responsible for voice services in urban and rural area, they diverted the money from remote area to semi-urban and urban area. So is any study or guideline available to track the actual utilization?
Shanazi bhai, we are losing you. We're not able to hear.
Okay.
Yeah, but
Can you hear me?
I got the point. Yes, I got the.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think I got the point. It's very important. The performance is not just about tracking the budget and ultimately ticking a box that this money has been spent. It involves much more than just that. And you're right. We need to look at the whole issue in a more holistic way and look at how the systems have been enabling or disabling the actual utilization of funds. I think that's very important, and that was actually part of what I wanted to also ask Katerina earlier. One of the issues that come up is this spending the allocated budget. We see that in most departments, including WASH, and particularly around infrastructure, and even in behavior change communication and training, the whole of the 11 months of the year, the departments keep quiet, but come the last month, the entire spending is incurred. So it's important that we keep track of what has been allocated and what is being utilized right through the year. And it would be good to have it as a calendarized event, at least at a quarterly basis, so that we will get to know what is happening with the money and how that is getting translated into actual action. So if there are any examples that have already been documented as part of the development of this handbook, it would be very interesting to know that. But that apart, in India, we have this process of social audit, where in a participatory way, we can mobilize communities to look at these processes and the end result as well. It's not just the end result, but a process of from the beginning to the end analysis. And some of our organizations at the grassroots, even in the state of Karnataka, we have done a few such social audits. I know of Tamil Nadu, where our FANSA members have done such social audit exercises with the community, sitting with the community with the local panchayats and looking at what has happened, what has transpired in WASH. I'm sure this platform would get that bit further enriched if such experiences can be shared. So it would be very nice if all the participants can respond over the next few days and come up with what they have observed and what they have seen and what impact they have created. So that I think would help all of us in strengthening the whole process.
Sitaramji, I just would like to very quick, Shanasirji, that's yes, in one case this is okay. That's to the transferring the fund from one line item to another. That's also kind of problem or also challenge in the budgeting process and also utilization. But in the budget tracking process, what we have tried to see that within the existing systems, how people can be engaged and how the service providers can also be accountable. That's what the main mechanism in the budget tracking process. There is definitely there would have a lot of challenges and also problems, but this in the first tier of the success of budget tracking is it creating the space for the community to engage in the systems. Thank you.
Can I just mention one thing quickly, Doctor?
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
We've been.
Hello.
Thanks. We've been actually recently. We've been recently holding a learning series, which is actually has touched on many of these issues, and particularly around things like budget credibility and tracking budget execution. And the focus has been on execution during the COVID-19 period, but I think there's quite a lot there that could be quite helpful, I think, in a lot of quite interesting examples. So I'm going to put it here in the chat as well. And then some of the past events in particular, there was about 2 weeks ago, the presentations are all online. So I think, and there were some really good ones, one from the Philippines, I think, which was really interesting as well. So yeah, so I just want to pop that there, and you feel free to explore some of those examples might be helpful in terms of this issue. Thanks.
Sitaram, just Eloise here, just in terms of examples, I think it could be interesting to hear as well from Katerina that might also provide some further examples based on your request. I don't know, Katerina, if you would want to add.
I think, I mean, what you mentioned, sir, on the 11 months they keep quiet, and then we only know how much they did not spend towards the end of the year. Well, there's two issues here. So the examples that we have that are best are coming from Bangladesh, from Mali, Uganda, and Kenya as well. And they really are about actually training and capacity strengthening of local government on this whole process of budgeting, and also where are some of the blockages for spending it. And what we have noticed is that it took a while in the beginning to form this alliance almost, but then local governments start seeing that they could get more budgets, not only for the water sector, but also for other sectors, when they're very, very clear in their objectives and how they want to spend the funds. So I would strategically, from what works, I would go from an ally perspective before bringing in the word of social audit. You bring in like the word audit and it's like, oh, even budget tracking, it's already a little bit sensitive, but it's about the words that you use to start this process. So we also work with Watershed. We work in some really complex and difficult areas like Mali or even in India. And what worked best is really, let's try to do something jointly to bring the coverage and the quality of services really to the marginalized. What has worked really well as well, and at the start of 4 years ago, when we started working with the local partners, both in India and in Bangladesh, it was really difficult to really bring the grassroots to the table for the discussion. And we're talking about women, and we're talking about illiterate women who don't even know how to speak and write. That step of our own CSO and NGO partners to bringing their voice to the table and not speaking for them was already quite a mindset. But you can see, I mean, the videos, that 11-minute video, you can see these women being so proud of, they don't need to read and write to be able to know how to influence a budget process. And I think that's one of the most humbling experiences for all of us in the team, is to see them, just giving them the space, the voice. It's their own language. It's their own culture. I mean, there's a lot of constraints here, but being respectful of that, and being what they're able, seeing what they're able to achieve. So it was less difficult than we all thought. I think our own mindset was the most difficult, of our own CSOs, our own NGOs, to bring them, to empower them to have that voice in some of those budget discussion meetings, or the accountability ones. So my message in the end is really, don't just focus on one moment, just don't focus on one report or in the year, but really engage throughout the budget cycles, and supporting our local governments and local service providers to deliver better services.
Yeah, thank you, Katerina. That's a very, very valid point. Constructive and positive engagement as the first and primary step. That's extremely important to note before pointing fingers and taking an obstructionist stand. Yeah, a very, very valid point. So we had, like I was saying initially, we had some answers, some examples of what had been done, but now we will come to the question. If all the participants can think of some important question that would be very relevant and would make an impact on the budgets, that we can ask to the finance minister in the finance minister's meeting that's coming up soon. It would be very useful if you can share your thoughts on this. So what would be the question that we should be asking our finance ministers? So if if all of you can brainstorm on that and share your contributions, share your thoughts, that would be great.
Yes, just maybe to add, Staram here. So as I explained, there will be a civil society representative at the finance ministers meeting for Asia. We did a selection process in April for the April finance ministers meeting, which is now delayed now to this December one. And it will be Vedika who will be sharing those questions with the finance ministers. So please share with us, and now the floor is yours, if you have some critical questions you would like to ask to finance ministers. And if you're not able to do it today, you can write to Anjani and I, or you can go through FANSA to gather the questions so we can share it back with Vedika.
Yeah. Thank you, Eloise. In view of keeping up to the time, I think it would be good if all of us can think through and send our suggestions on what questions can be asked to the finance ministers by mail, so that we can consolidate that.
Yeah, there's one question actually already in the chat, which is, what is the budget portion that is, I suppose, targeted for excluded people? So something about targeting finance for excluded people, and what is the portion that is actually effectively allocated to these people. So thank you for that. Others, you can continue putting your questions in the chat, or the floor is yours now. One thing, Sitaram, that seems to come very strongly from the discussion is this having maybe a question really on performance and making sure that there is efficiencies for the disbursement and the targeting of the funding to WASH and also to those that are left behind. So I've noted that, and we will be working with Vedika to look at potentially shaping a question around this issue. Does anyone want to take the floor or
Eloise,
ask?
I think we lost you.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, Eloise.
Yeah.
Sorry, no, I was just saying that I've been hearing very closely that there is definitely a need for a question around efficiencies of funding for the targeting those that are left behind and for WASH. So I'm writing this down and I'll be working with Vedika on shaping a question that we can share back with you.
Yeah. So maybe some queries about not just allocation, but targeting within the allocation and the utilization and efficiency of utilization and tracking it through. So these are probably some of the ideas that are coming up. We could, wait for some more time for more thoughts to be shared and then share it across all the participants so that that would help us come up with sharp, crisp, and valid questions. So that would be the way forward, I guess.
Sure. Is there any other burning question you would like to ask to finance ministers? If not, we'll proceed in this way and I will share Anjani and I's email into the discussion box. Okay, then Sitaram, I think then we'll proceed this way. I'll ask people to write their questions directly to Anjani and myself, and I think we can move into the last section and the wrapping up. Great. So then for the last section, we just wanted to give the floor now to Sneha and to FANSA so they can present some of the work that they're doing and they will be doing around vulnerable groups and this policy brief that they're working on. Sneha, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Heloise. Thanks very much. Good morning, Europe. Good afternoon, parts of Asia, and good evening, India. It's a pleasure to be on this platform, and I once again thank everyone for making it convenient to attend this webinar. It's very, very important, and I've been listening from Katharina's presentation to Jobair, Vedika, and Kramer. I think very, very informative presentations and very, very important issues have been covered, and I'm sure this would really be helpful for a lot of the grassroots organizations which are members of FANSA who would be beneficial through this webinar. Now let me introduce our own work to you. As you all know, FANSA is Freshwater Action Network South Asia. It's a network of 400 plus CSOs working in the region, and we have got 6 chapters in the FANSA national chapters in Bangladesh, Nepal, Afghanistan, India, Sri Lanka, and Pakistan. And we have got associates in Bhutan and Maldives, and we are going to have national chapters in these 2 countries also very soon. And basically our work focuses on lobbying and advocacy, and then bringing the community voices to the regional and international platforms, asking about what they need and what they have and what is their status. And FANSA also has been working hard to bring the evidence-based lessons and feedback and gives it to the government and also to the sector partners so that they can design the policies and programs that are beneficial to the leave no one behind groups. As you have been seeing that our work majorly focuses on equitable and inclusive WASH services to the LNOB groups and the advocacy actions that are required to defend these WASH rights of the vulnerable group. So this year also, it's one of our focused area as part of our current year's action plan. And then as part of that, this year we have conducted focused group discussions with the 5 LNOB groups. The LNOB groups included the homeless, slum dwellers, people with disabilities and hard to reach areas, sanitation workers, and then with these 5 groups across 7 South Asian countries. In Afghanistan, Bhutan, Bangladesh, India, Nepal, and Pakistan and Sri Lanka, we have conducted about 100+ consultations at various locations, and to basically look at what is the WASH status of these vulnerable groups, especially in the context of COVID-19, and what were the commitments of the government, whether governments were able to fulfill these commitments that they have been given, and what were the allocations for them, whether there were any specific allocations in terms of improving their WASH services. And also we tried to look at what was their situation, especially in the lockdown period during COVID-19. So a lot of these issues that have come up as part of these consultations, now we have organized, few countries have already organized the national webinars out of these issues that have come out of the FGDs. One example is India case, where we had the national webinar where the government representatives and also the other stakeholder representatives were there to look at, the questions that were raised by these communities during the focus group discussions, and also what was their status, and then what could be those key messages that these groups were asking, or what these focused group discussions have come out. I think these key messages, one is that we are formulating into these national webinars to ask the governments, and the second purpose of these FGDs is also to know what are the asks of these vulnerable groups, whether we can convert these asks and then formulate into key messages to the finance ministers meeting. And we are also trying to plan a policy brief so that we can distribute to the finance ministers during this FMM meeting, raising the voices of the CSO, raising the voices of these community members, and also how the CSOs can advocate better during these finance ministers meeting with the help of this policy brief. As you say, as you noticed in my first slide, can you just go back my first slide, please? Yeah. So the FANSA is organizing, previous one, previous one. The previous one? Yeah. So, no, the previous one before this. Yeah, I just wanted to say that this, no, previous to this, please. So this particular webinar is the regional webinar where we are going to invite all the stakeholders, CSOs, and then sector stakeholders to this webinar, where we would be discussing on the WASH status of the vulnerable groups and what needs to be done to improve their services. So this regional webinar is based on those key messages that we received from the focused group discussions, and this we are going to organize in collaboration with SWA and also United Nations University from Accra, Ghana. So this is the title of the webinar. I would request all of you to come and join this webinar and then provide your feedback and provide your the key messages that we are going to derive out of these things. We'll be presenting there, and we also would like to have your presentation there. And some of the top line messages that we have received so far. Next slide, please. The key messages are that the real-time data is absent. The comprehensive national level mapping of these marginalized and vulnerable communities to track their specific progress on SDG 6 within a stipulated time frame. I think across almost all the countries now this has been witnessed that there is no specific disaggregated data that is available for the vulnerable groups, and this is very, very essential for targeting, planning, budgeting, monitoring, and holding implementing agencies accountable. And the digital technology enabled dashboards are there. In fact, even in India and other countries, there are a lot of online information is available, but not exclusively disaggregated data for those vulnerable groups which are always left behind or who are in the last mile reach. So this is one of the key messages that that has come out. And then another important thing is that there has to be dedicated financial resources, and also they need to be estimated properly. The costs of watch services to the excluded communities must be realistically estimated. Usually what happens is governments go with the standard rates that are estimated across all the geographic conditions, across all the socio-economic conditions, and all the people equally. But this will not work out for some of the areas where there are natural disasters happen, or some of the areas which are difficult to reach, and some of those groups where a lot of behavior change is required. So if you go for uniform allocations, this might not be possible. Hence, there has to be a dedicated financial resources to that local context specific groups, and then context specific hydrogeological conditions. So those kind of things have to be really worked out, and that kind of dedicated financial resources need to be there, and they have to be tracked is one of the key line message that has come out from some of these focus discussions that have already happened. And then another important thing that has come out is the sustainable supply chains. Again, there is a lot of bias on infrastructure provision, but later on the operation maintenance and then all those things are not being given equal importance. So these are some of the issues that the finance ministers have to focus on, or the budget allocations at the country level need to be uniform across all these different operations, and across the supply chain, there has to be a balance that need to be maintained, and the disbursement of financial incentives also to be regulated, and the flow of funds has to be in such a way that all these activities can happen simultaneously with and effectively building the capacities of the people who are involved. And similarly, technological solutions, again, this is another very, very important thing, because we cannot go with uniform twin pit leach toilet for across India or across South Asia. We need to have, again, the technical designs for the PWDs, technical designs for some of the hard rock areas, or some of the high rainfall zones, or the saline conditions. We need to have those kind of specific guidelines. Again, the cost estimations, and then again the capacity building. All these things also have to be packed in, and then there has to be a lobby for this particular thing. And as you said, again, in all other presentations also it has come up. It is very, very important to build the capacity of the watch sector stakeholders, because the culture must be reoriented to make the targeted process in addressing these gaps and inequities. Despite there are allocations, all of you know that there are specific allocations for SC and STs in India. But when you go through a budget analysis, every year there is unspent balance which is left behind with the governments, which at the end of the year they convert for some other purposes. Actually, this has to be tracked in cycles from the beginning, as Katharina was saying, that, like, you know, from the start of budget allocation till the end, there has to be cycles of looking at these things and how these can be implemented, and how these, if there are left behind, how these needs to be planned and done. That has to be kind of a continuous process, rather than just one ad hoc allocation and then leave it at there. And also the most important thing is the collaborative and coordinated efforts of all the sector players. It's not that all these donors just talk about the behavior change and they're not bothered about the operation maintenance, or the government putting only on the capital investment and then not taking care of the other areas, and the CSO is only talking about the behavior change, and then always, you know, we have the clash with the governments saying that, you know, they always try to tell us that you are being too critical, or, you know, not providing enough place, or there are no platforms platforms to raise these issues. So these kind of things have to be, these barriers have to be broken down, and there has to be, as SWA keeps on promoting those collaborative behaviors and then coordinated efforts to bring these multi-sector platforms which are active, vibrant, and then which really works in coordination with the government is very, very important in this need of the hour. And these are some of the key messages that have come out. And I'm sure once we complete this regional webinar and then these 100 consultations across all the countries, we might get much more rich information, which we would be consolidating and putting into a policy brief, and then bring it to you all also before the before we finalize. We also share the draft with you so that you can also input into these this policy brief so that we can share it at the finance ministers meeting.
Great. Thank you so much, Neha.
Eloise, thanks very much. Thanks for this opportunity.
Great, thank you. Thank you for this. So I'm going to now wrap up the Exchange and Learning workshop. I wanted to thank all of you for being here, for listening, for exchanging. This is really a format where it's about kind of learning from each other. So thank you for being interactive and stepping up. I also wanted to thank Katerina for her presentation and her interventions, Sitaram for doing an amazing job on the facilitation, and obviously our speakers, both within SWA and outside of SWA. So really a big thank you to all of you. Also to Anjani, who's my colleague and who's helped in coordinating this. I just wanted to leave one message, which is please remember to register for the finance ministers meeting. This is a great opportunity for you to listen to what finance ministers are saying in order to shape your messages. The policy brief is going to be a good occasion as well to galvanize and gather the observations from the region. And finally, if you still have questions to share with us for the finance ministers, we've given you Anjani and I's email, so please send them to us before Wednesday, and we will be working with a close group around Vedika to prepare for her speech. So thank you, everyone. And we will be in touch at the upcoming FANSA webinar, but also at the finance ministers meeting and through the messages for finance ministers. Thank you, everyone, and have a lovely end of the day. We will send all presentations and recordings to you via email.